Hello? My name is Mila. My parents said I was strong, so strong, in fact, that I could afford to sacrifice everything, including my home. They doubled my rent to support my unemployed sister, told me not to be selfish, while she moved in, took over my space, and acted like it was hers all along. And when I finally said no, they made me the villain. But here's the thing. What if walking away isn't betrayal, but survival? What really happens when the good daughter stops playing her part? Would you have stayed? It was still dark when I heard the knock. Not the kind you'd expect from a delivery guy or a friendly neighbor. This was heavy, urgent, like someone trying to break through the morning. I blinked, disoriented, the red digits on my nightstand glowing 7:02 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not her. I wrapped my robe around me and shuffled through the small hallway to the door, still half asleep, still believing maybe I'd imagined it. But when I cracked the door open, there she was. Mayless, hair disheveled in a way that somehow still looked styled, oversized sunglasses, iced latte balanced in one hand, dragging a leopard print suitcase behind her with the other. "Hey, sis," she said with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "I just need a place to crash for a bit. Things got complicated." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what? What are you talking about? Mayless, why are you—" "I'll explain later, promise. Can I just come in? I've been Ubering since 6. She didn't wait for a yes. The suitcase rolled across my hardwood floor before I could get a word in. I closed the door slowly behind her, a knot already forming in my chest. "Does Mom know?" I asked, quietly. Mayless gave a shrug, sipping from her straw like we were just catching up for brunch. "She knows I needed a break. You know how she is. She said you've got plenty of space and a great setup. I figured it made sense." That wasn't an answer. But the way she tossed her coat on my armchair like it was hers, that was Mayless. I stood there, still barefoot, trying to process what just happened. In the silence that followed, I heard her zipping open her bag and rustling through clothes in the living room. She'd made herself at home in under 3 minutes. By the time I showered and got dressed, she had moved on from settling in to full-on claiming the space. Her makeup spread across the kitchen island, her shoes lined along the front door like this was her lease. "I hope you don't mind," she called out. "The living room's just warmer. I figured I'll sleep there." It wasn't a question. I bit my lip, walked back to the kitchen, and pulled open my laptop. Mayless was humming some pop song, completely at ease. I, on the other hand, was already losing control of my routine, of my space, of the only thing that felt truly mine. I texted my friend Sophie. "Me. Is this normal? I didn't agree to this." Sophie. "She just showed up? Did she even ask?" Me. "No, and Mom definitely orchestrated it." Sophie. "Oh, honey, that's not a visit. That's a siege." I glanced over. Mayless was scrolling on her phone, one leg curled under her on my couch, her bags now split open on the rug. I turned back to my screen. I had a client call in 15 minutes. I could make space for her. For a few days. I could be the good daughter. That's what Mom always said I was. But something about the way Mayless settled in made me feel like this wasn't going to be a few days. It wasn't even noon when I checked my inbox between meetings and saw the subject line, "Updated rent agreement." I clicked. The message was from Dad's email, but it sounded like Mom. "Since Mayless is staying there for now, we'll need to adjust your rent to reflect dual occupancy. It's still far below market value. Hope you understand." That was it. No greeting. No signature. Just an attachment and numbers. I stared at the screen, the air sucked out of the room. Adjusted rent. Dual occupancy? They were charging me more to house my unemployed sister. I didn't know what stung more, being used or the assumption that I'd just go along with it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I sat there, my cursor blinking on the reply box. Then I closed the tab. That evening, Mayless commandeered the TV, flipping through channels like she'd paid for the streaming services. I heated leftovers, ate standing at the counter while she blasted music from her phone. I didn't say anything. What was there to say that wouldn't make me sound bitter? Around 10:30, I tried to tidy the kitchen before bed. She'd left lipstick smudges on one of my white mugs. I scrubbed at it harder than necessary, My apartment was small, cozy. It was never meant to hold two grown women. But it wasn't the square footage that made it feel tight. It was her presence, her assumption. I crawled into bed that night, exhausted but wired. The bedroom door didn't quite shut all the way. I made a mental note to fix the latch. From the other room, I could hear Melis's light snoring, mixed with occasional coughs from her vape pen. My pillow felt unfamiliar, my sheets twisted. I couldn't find stillness. Staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "This isn't going to work." I wasn't sure what I meant by that, but I knew it was true. My phone lit up on the nightstand. A text. "Mom. Family sticks together, Mila. Don't be selfish." The rain hadn't let up since yesterday. I sat on the edge of my bed that morning, staring at the puddles forming on the windowsill. Outside, the streets looked blurred, like the city couldn't quite decide whether it wanted to wash itself clean or just wallow. Inside, I felt the same. I got up, pulled on an oversized sweater, and stepped out into the living room, my living room, or at least it had been before it turned into a staging ground for Melis's comeback tour. She was sprawled across the couch, still in the same sweatpants from 2 days ago, phone in one hand, a half-eaten cinnamon roll in the other. My throw pillows were all on the floor, again. "Morning," I said, heading toward the kitchen. She replied, not looking up. I started the coffee maker. It was louder than usual. Maybe because the silence between us had stretched so thin, every small sound felt like it could break it. I opened the cabinet to grab my favorite mug, the blue one with the chipped handle from college, but it wasn't there. It took me a second to find it, shoved behind 3 mismatched cups Melis had pulled in from who knows where. I didn't say anything. I just made my coffee. That had become a theme. I was learning to make room for her. Literally. I'd already packed away my extra blankets and rearranged the front closet to fit her growing pile of coats and boots. I moved my work things into a corner of my bedroom and adjusted my remote work schedule to start earlier, before she started blasting YouTube videos from her phone. It was supposed to be temporary. That's what I kept telling myself. "You're the stable one, Mila. You'll get through this. Be the good sister." That afternoon, I was in the middle of a Zoom call with a client when I heard a knock on my bedroom door. I muted myself. "Yeah?" Melis peeked her head in. "Hey, quick question. Do you mind if I borrow your navy wrap dress?" I blinked at her. "I have a meeting." "Oh, right. I have this friend who's doing a photo thing and I don't have anything clean. I'll bring it back tonight." Before I could respond, she was already gone. I sat there, staring at my screen. The client was talking about content pacing and brand voice, but all I could think about was that dress. It wasn't just a piece of fabric, it was confidence. I'd picked it out months ago for an in-person pitch I'd been preparing for. A big one. One I hadn't told anyone about yet. The meeting ended, but my thoughts didn't. Around 5, I heard the front door slam. Laughter, Melis, and a friend. I peeked out from the hallway and saw her twirling in my dress, wine glass in hand. "It hugs me perfectly," she giggled. "It's like it was made for me." Her friend laughed. "You look like a boss." I closed the door and went back to my room. By nightfall, the dress was on my bed. Stained. I didn't ask. She didn't explain. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and just wrote the truth. I feel like a guest in my own home. I paused, then added, a guest who still pays the mortgage, does the dishes, and refills the coffee beans. I listed everything I'd adjusted in the past 2 weeks, my work schedule, my budget, my silence, every compromise, every swallowed response. Then I flipped the page. But if I say no, I'll be called selfish. Again. It wasn't just a fear, it was a prediction, a script I knew by heart, because I'd lived it. The next morning, I called Mom. I didn't plan to. My thumb just hovered over her contact until instinct took over. She picked up on the second ring. "Mila, I was just thinking about you." "Hi." I sat on the edge of the bed. I wanted to talk about the rent thing. There was a pause. "Oh, honey, I thought we already settled that. It's really not about the money. It's about helping your sister get back on her feet. I'm not saying she can't be here, but it's my apartment. I just wish I'd been asked before decisions were made." Vera's voice softened in that way she always did when she was about to lay it on thick. You're so responsible. Always have been. That's why we trust you with this. You've built a life. Malis is still figuring things out. She's fragile right now. I'm tired, Mom. You're strong. You can handle this. You always have. Just remember, family sticks together, sweetheart. That was it. That was the line. The one that ended every argument before it started. I hung up, sat there in silence, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Not because I needed to see myself, but because I needed to remind myself I still existed in this place, the place where my boundaries no longer mattered. Later that afternoon, I found my dress folded and shoved into the laundry basket. The wine stain had set in. Permanent. Amalis walked by, sipping a smoothie she'd made in my Vitamix. You looked mad earlier. What? It's just a dress. We're sisters. Don't be weird about it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already knew, and she didn't care. That night, I didn't journal. I didn't vent to Sophie. I didn't even cry. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the empty spot where my dress used to hang, and I whispered the line again, this time like a curse. But if I say no, I'll be called selfish. Again, I woke up feeling like I hadn't really slept. That kind of sleep where your body shuts down, but your mind keeps pacing, going over the same lines, rewriting them in your head, but never landing anywhere new. I rolled out of bed, tied my hair back, and went straight to the kitchen. I didn't even bother looking toward the living room. I could already hear the low hum of Malis's voice on speakerphone, laughing at something someone said. She had friends who spoke loudly, laughed louder, and never seemed to care what time it was or whose space they were in. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the pot I'd brewed hours earlier, then slipped into sneakers and grabbed my hoodie from the back of the chair. I'm heading out for a bit, I said over my shoulder. Cool, Malis replied without turning. Can you pick up oat milk? We're out. I walked 2 blocks down to a quiet corner cafe. I didn't need the coffee. I needed the quiet. The kind of quiet where no one knew your name, no one expected you to solve their life, and nobody asked for more than what you'd already given. I stayed out longer than I planned, wandered a few extra blocks, walked into a bookstore just to touch spines of books I wouldn't buy. At some point, I sat on a park bench and just stared at people walking their dogs. I didn't want to go home yet. But eventually, the sun started to set. My battery was low. My body was cold. I walked back. From the hallway, I could already hear the music. Not a playlist, not background sound. Full-blown music, and voices, laughter. When I opened the door, I had to blink. There were at least 10 people in my apartment. I didn't know a single one of them. Malis was in the center of it all, barefoot, wearing a vintage tee I thought she'd donated years ago, red wine in hand, talking animatedly to a guy who looked like he hadn't seen a laundromat in a month. Hey, she said, seeing me. You're back. This is Jeremy, and that's Lacey. She's in real estate. She says your place has character. My place. Is this? I started, scanning the room. What is this? A little get-together. Nothing major. You said you were going out, so I figured, why not? I didn't say you could have a party, I said quietly. She shrugged. It's not really a party. It's just a few friends. Don't be so uptight. Someone turned the music louder. I stood there, clutching my keys, wondering how we got here so fast. You're the roommate, right? A guy with a beanie asked. Mila, was it? Roommate. Malis laughed. She didn't correct him. I didn't answer. I walked straight to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. I listened to the sound of glasses clinking, the thump of bass, the squeak of my floorboards under unfamiliar feet. I stayed in my room until the music stopped, until the front door slammed one last time. I heard someone yell, "Thanks," as they left. I waited an extra hour before I came out. The apartment looked like a thrift store, and a frat house had collided. Lipstick on the couch. Wine rings on the table. Someone's shoe left in the hallway. My throw blanket, smelling of cheap perfume and burnt something, was bunched in the corner. Malis was asleep on the couch, arm draped across her forehead like a silent movie actress. I didn't wake her, I just cleaned. The next morning, over coffee, I tried to bring it up. About last night. Malis rolled her eyes before I even finished. Relax, Mila. It was one night. I'll help clean later. It's not like your couch is new. That part stung more than I expected. I didn't say anything else, but I did take photos of the stains, of the wine glasses left on the shelf, of the full ashtray someone had left on the windowsill. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I needed to remember. Later that morning, I got ready for a work call. My hair was still damp from the shower. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, clicked the video link, and nothing. No connection. I checked the Wi-Fi settings, no available network. I walked into the living room. Malis, did you change the Wi-Fi? She looked up from her phone. Oh yeah, the old password was too complicated. I made it something easier. Easier for who? She blinked. Me. Duh. I have meetings. Work. Just use your phone's hotspot. It's 2023, Mila. That night, I changed the password back and added a lock to my bedroom door. I didn't ask permission. I didn't explain. I just did it. Later, after dinner, I ate mine in the bedroom. She ordered Thai and left the containers out. I opened my journal again. If I disappear, I wrote, no one here would notice. I think that's what scares me most. Not that I'm being erased, but that I'm erasing myself. I paused. And then I wrote, in smaller print, beneath the line, not yet, not completely. The words were still ringing in my ears as I pulled into my parents' driveway. You're making this harder than it has to be. She said it casually, like it was a passing comment, like I was the problem for not lying down and letting her take whatever she wanted. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the car for a moment, watching the condensation bloom on the inside of the windshield. My hands were still gripping the wheel, too tightly. I exhaled, reached into the back seat for the small chocolate tart I picked up from the bakery near my apartment. A peace offering, or maybe just a distraction. Something to put between me and the weight of this dinner. The house hadn't changed. Same manicured lawn, same wind chimes clinking softly on the front porch. It still smelled like lemon polish and obligation. Vera greeted me with a bright, syrupy smile. There's my girl. You look tired. You working too hard again? I forced a smile. Just the usual. Come in, come in. Your sister's already here. She helped me set the table. Of course she did. Malis was seated at the dining table, her legs crossed like she was holding court. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, the kind she wore when she wanted to look composed but undone. She looked up from her phone and offered me a sweet, slow smile. Hey, Mila, glad you could make it. Yeah, I said, setting down the tart on the counter. Wouldn't miss it. Dinner was roast chicken, green beans with slivered almonds, and mashed potatoes, Vera's go-to when she wanted things to feel warm and traditional. We made small talk. I answered questions about work. Malis talked about how she was taking time to focus on her mental health. I sipped my water, listening, not speaking unless spoken to. Something about the way the conversation kept circling around Malis made my skin itch. After the dishes were cleared and the last of the wine was poured, Gideon stood up and walked into his office. When he came back, he carried a manila folder. He placed it quietly beside my plate. Vera smiled, soft and tight. This is just formal, sweetheart. Nothing big. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. What is it? A small update, Gideon said. We realized the rent hasn't changed in years, and with Malis staying there, well, dual occupancy changes things. It's still a great deal. You emailed this already, I said, my voice flat. We figured it'd be better to talk in person, Vera added. Things can get misinterpreted over email. I opened the folder slowly. Inside was a printed lease. My name at the top, a highlighted section where the monthly rent was nearly double what I'd been paying. Due in 14 days. I stared at the numbers. Is this a joke? No, Gideon said calmly. This is a formal arrangement. Mila, we're not charging you market rate. If anything, we're still subsidizing you. You're charging me more, I said, voice rising just a bit, to keep living in my apartment because someone else moved in without asking me. And now I'm the one footing the difference? It's not about money, Vera said gently. It's about family. Malis needs this right now. I looked at my sister. She wasn't smiling anymore, but her expression wasn't regretful either, just blank. "Have I not been helping enough?" I asked, looking between them. I didn't ask her to move in. I didn't agree to this. And now I'm being told, at a dinner table, to sign something that changes everything? Malis sipped her wine. "It's not that deep, Mila." I laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound. Vera leaned forward slightly. "We just assumed you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one. You've had it good for a long time." "This is about doing what's right." I placed my napkin on the table and looked at my father. "You didn't even call. You didn't ask. You just decided." Gideon nodded, not unkindly. "Because we trust you'll do the right thing." There it was again, that phrase. The right thing. It never meant fair. It meant easy for them. I stood slowly. "I'm not signing this. You can take it home," he said, voice clipped. "But don't take too long." Vera smiled again. "We'll talk more about it soon, okay?" As we walked toward the door, Malis brushed past me and whispered, "You're making this harder than it has to be." I paused on the threshold, my coat in one hand, the folder in the other. "I could say the same to you," I said quietly. I didn't slam the door when I left. That would have felt too theatrical. I just walked out into the cold, climbed into my car, and sat there. I stared at the dashboard until the condensation started forming again. Then I reached across the passenger seat, opened the folder, and read every line. By the time I made it home, I had a headache that pulsed behind my eyes. Malis was already asleep on the couch, a half-empty glass of wine beside her, the TV still playing something mindless and bright. I closed the folder, tucked it into the drawer under my bed, and opened my laptop. Not to email anyone, not to argue, just to pull up my lease. The original one. The one I signed before all of this. Because I wasn't going to let them decide what was right for me anymore. I didn't touch the folder again for 2 days. It stayed where I left it, under my bed, wedged between a pair of winter boots I hadn't worn since February, and a box of old cables I kept meaning to throw out. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it said. The air in the apartment had gone stale. There were no open fights, no screaming, not even passive-aggressive notes. Just the silence that comes when someone's winning and doesn't need to fight anymore. Malis walked through the space like she'd signed something I hadn't. She blasted podcasts in the morning while I worked, left the bathroom in a perpetual state of chaos, and treated every closed door like it was an invitation. That morning, I was wiping down the kitchen counter, phone wedged between my ear and shoulder as I listened to a client run through website copy. My own phone buzzed on the table behind me. Malis's, I realized when I glanced back. It had vibrated twice before I picked it up to move it off my paperwork. And then the screen lit up. From Mom. "Just stay calm. She'll give up and leave. The place will be yours eventually." My hand froze. I stared at the message like it had been sent to me by accident. But it hadn't. It was clear, short, strategic. I didn't have time to react. Malis walked into the kitchen just as I was setting her phone down. She saw the look on my face and paused. She didn't ask if I read it. She didn't explain. Instead, she reached for a spoon from the drawer, as if we were still 2 girls sharing cereal before school. "Don't forget to get more oat milk," she said, voice flat. "You're almost out." I left the room without a word. My hands were shaking, my legs too, but I walked anyway, straight to my bedroom, where I closed the door, sat on the floor, and stared at the mirror leaning against the far wall. Or at least, what was left of it. The glass was cracked, split clean across the center like a bolt of lightning had struck it. I blinked, looked again. There was no mistaking it. My mirror. My mirror. Not just something reflective. It was the only piece left from my aunt's house after she passed. She was the only one who ever told me I could build a life that wasn't about pleasing other people. The mirror had been hers, and then it became mine. I crawled toward it, heart in my throat. The frame was tilted. The nail had been pulled from the wall completely. The impact had shattered the center, spiderwebbing outward. Behind me, I heard Malis's voice. "Oh, yeah, that fell this morning. Must have been the wall hook. Cheap, huh?" I turned slowly. She was standing in the doorway, sipping from a mason jar, perfectly calm. "I was gonna tell you," she added. It just slipped my mind. I looked at the mirror again, like maybe I'd imagined all of this. "Don't worry. You can get another one," she said with a shrug. "It's not like it was new." She walked off. That was the moment something cracked, not the kind of crack you fix, the kind that makes the entire structure unstable. I picked up the largest piece of the broken mirror and held it gently in my hands. My reflection looked warped and fragmented, just like everything else in this apartment had started to feel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood, walked to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the original lease I had printed months ago when I first moved in. Every word felt like an anchor: legal, defined, boundaried. I grabbed a highlighter and went over key phrases like they were scripture. My name, my rights, the lack of any clause that allowed for additional tenants without consent. Then I opened my laptop, not for emails this time. I started a new document and titled it Timeline. I wrote down the day Malis moved in, the rent change email, the mirror, the party, the text, receipts. They always said I was quiet. They forgot I remember everything. Later that evening, Malis went out again, some networking mixer with a friend in marketing. She threw on one of my jackets before she left. Didn't ask. Once she was gone, I moved quickly. I locked every drawer in the apartment I could, the desk, the filing cabinet, even the hallway closet. Then I texted Sophie. "Do you still have the name of that lawyer your brother used during the sublease fight?" She replied in under a minute. "Yes, sending now. You okay?" "Not yet, but I will be." I copied the number, saved it under exit strategy, and drafted a short intro email, just asking for a consultation. Nothing dramatic, just information. Then, finally, I opened a new tab and typed, "One-bedroom apartments near Capitol Hill, Seattle." The listings loaded slowly. My internet was lagging again, but I didn't care. I scrolled, read, bookmarked. Some places were too far, some too dark, some way over budget. But I wasn't looking for perfect. I was looking for mine. The next morning, Malis was already in the kitchen when I walked out, wrapped in the robe she'd borrowed weeks ago and never returned. She had made pancakes, burnt ones, and left the pan in the sink. "Oh, you're quiet," she said, mouth full. "Still mad about the mirror?" I poured myself coffee. "You know what Mom says," she continued. "Stuff breaks. People don't." I didn't respond. Instead, I stirred my coffee slowly and watched her, like someone studying a person they thought they knew but were seeing clearly for the first time. No one had broken the mirror. It had just shown me what was already shattered. After I hit submit, I didn't move for a full minute, just stared at the confirmation screen. It was done. Application sent. A small one-bedroom unit 15 blocks away. Older building, no parking, but a door I could lock and a space that would belong to me. The sun was already starting to rise. I hadn't realized how long I'd been sitting at my desk. My coffee had gone cold. In the other room, I heard Malis shift on the couch. Her cough echoed lightly through the walls. I closed the laptop, stretched my arms behind my back, and allowed myself one breath of stillness. That weekend, Vera invited us to a family brunch. It was at my cousin Emily's condo in Queen Anne. I didn't want to go, but skipping would have only added fuel to whatever version of me they were spinning. She's antisocial. She's difficult. She thinks she's better than us. It was easier to show up, keep the mask on, play the role they preferred. So I dressed neatly. High-neck blouse, hair pulled back, a thin gold chain from my late aunt. The one thing I always wore when I needed quiet strength. The moment I walked into the condo, I knew something was off. The table was beautifully set, the coffee bar was stocked, and the laughter was easy. But none of it felt warm. Vera greeted me with her usual overly saccharine tone. There she is. Our little workaholic. Malis was already seated, tucked between two aunts like royalty, wearing a flowy white top and soft curls that made her look angelic. The kind of woman people protect without asking why. I took a seat near the end of the table and poured myself coffee. Light chatter floated around the room. Real estate, vacation plans, someone's new boyfriend. I nodded when spoken to, smiled at appropriate pauses, but mostly stayed quiet, until the topic turned. Family is everything, Vera said suddenly, stirring her tea with a practiced grace. And I've always told my girls that you don't give up on each other, especially when times get hard. She looked directly at me when she said it. Malis chimed in, tone breathy and perfectly measured. I'm just really lucky. Not everyone would open their home like that. Some people would have thrown me out the minute I lost my job. A few people nodded sympathetically. Someone reached out to squeeze her hand. I sipped my coffee slowly, said nothing. Well? One of the older aunts turned toward me, smiling sweetly. So you're still living at home, right? I thought you had your own place. I blinked. Before I could answer, Malis laughed. Technically, it's the family's property. We both live there. It's kind of shared. The table chuckled. Someone muttered, roommates, huh? And then, your roommate said... I didn't even hear the rest of the sentence. The room had gone quieter than it should have. All at once, the air felt thick, like I was underwater. Watching people laugh at a joke that cost me everything, I didn't speak for a moment, not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. I set down my mug, looked straight ahead, and calmly said, Actually, I've paid market rent for 5 years. The table paused. Every single fork in that kitchen, I bought it, the couch, mine, the Wi-Fi bill, electricity, groceries, me. Aunt Denise looked uncomfortable. One cousin fidgeted with her napkin. And just to be clear, I added, voice steady, I didn't invite anyone to live there. I was told by people who never even asked how it would impact me. Malis's smile cracked, just slightly. Vera's tone sharpened. Mila, this isn't really the time. Isn't it? I turned to her. Because if we're going to talk about generosity and family, let's do it honestly, not like a headline on a holiday card. Silence again. And then, because this family doesn't apologize, only redirects, someone changed the subject. Something about Emily's engagement ring. I didn't hear the rest. The brunch ended awkwardly. I hugged no one. Malis didn't speak to me on the ride home. We sat in silence the entire way back. When we pulled up in front of the apartment, I didn't wait for her to get out first. I went inside, took off my shoes, and walked straight to my desk, opened my inbox. Apartment application. Approved. Move-in date, next Saturday. Deposit paid. Lease start, 10 days from today. I sat there for a few minutes, just staring at the screen. Then I printed the lease, hole-punched it, and slipped it into a fresh binder. I felt the calm of a woman who finally knew where her feet were standing. Malis walked in a few minutes later, phone still in hand, avoiding eye contact. I didn't say a word. She walked to the kitchen, then stopped halfway. You didn't have to make that so public. I looked at her, but not like I used to. You didn't have to lie. She scoffed. You're so dramatic, all this over a little help. No, I said softly. All this over a lot of taking. That night, I started boxing up the non-essentials. The books I'd already read, the dishes I didn't use often, photo frames. It wasn't about the objects, it was about momentum. I was leaving, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, from a role I didn't audition for, from a script they kept handing me that I was finally refusing to read. The call didn't come. Instead, it was an email. Late Friday afternoon. Subject line, final reminder, lease adjustment pending. It came from my father's inbox, but the language was unmistakably Vera's. She had a way of turning even administrative emails into subtle weapons. The tone soft, the message sharp. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I no longer needed their permission for what came next. The lease on my new apartment had been finalized earlier that week. A small unit tucked into the back half of a triplex in Wallingford. Just 520 square feet of chipped tile, drafty windows, and a clawfoot tub that leaned slightly to one side. But it had light. It had quiet. And it had a front door that locked behind me without anyone else's name on the lease. There was no perfume lingering in the hall, no voices bleeding through the wall, no shadows pretending to be warmth. Just space. And me. I'd paid the deposit in full, scheduled the utility transfer for Saturday morning. Not because I had to rush, but because I wanted to leave before anyone could ask why I hadn't said goodbye. Malis had mentioned her weekend plans earlier that week, a spa retreat with Vera, a little reset, she'd said, wearing a robe and a sheet mask. Gideon was supposed to join them Sunday for some kind of family wellness event, whatever that meant. They said it like it was normal, like they hadn't made a habit of stepping over the mess to light candles and call it healing. By 8 a.m. Saturday, I was dressed and waiting on the curb in jeans, an old hoodie, and sneakers that had carried me through harder exits. Sophie pulled up first in her boyfriend's dented Tacoma, no questions, just a nod and the engine still running. A few minutes later, another friend rolled in with a borrowed U-Haul and a pack of bungee cords. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I'd made lists, prioritized by room, labeled boxes, taped instructions to the inside of every cabinet, scheduled a donation pickup for that evening. I'd packed slowly over the course of the last month, small pieces each day, so no one would notice the space emptying until it was gone. We moved fast, room by room, we stripped it all. The couch I'd bought with my first holiday bonus, gone in 30 minutes. The shelf I assembled on my first solo Christmas, disassembled and wrapped in moving blankets. The framed photo of me and Aunt Ruth, her crooked grin reflecting in the mirror she left me, that went into the back seat of my car, wrapped in a towel, handled with care. Even the shower curtain came down. So did the light bulbs I'd replaced. The only things I left behind were the built-ins and the stale air that never really felt like mine. By mid-afternoon, the apartment looked like an abandoned showroom. Clean, empty, forgettable. I walked through each room one more time, barefoot. The floors were cold. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, empty. Above the kitchen light switch, I taped a sealed envelope. Inside it, a copy of my 30-day notice, signed and dated, a receipt confirming my final rent transfer, and a note, written in ink in my own slanted hand. Everything you didn't buy is gone. Everything you assumed is corrected. Then I locked the door. No pause, no ceremony. Just turned the key and walked away. The drive to Wallingford took 20 minutes, but it felt longer, like a threshold, like crossing a bridge that wasn't meant to be walked back over. Sophie followed behind in the U-Haul, music playing low, one hand on the wheel. We unloaded in a rhythm, box after box. No speeches, no sadness. The apartment smelled faintly of new paint and old wood. The windows were small, but they faced east. By morning, they'd glow. The water pressure was weak, but the silence was mine. By 7:45 p.m., I had unpacked the kettle, brewed a cup of green tea, and stood barefoot by the window, watching the city slowly exhale. Streetlights blinked on. A couple walked past, holding takeout. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang once. My body ached, but I didn't mind, because I was free. Across town, Malis returned first. She stepped into the house, sun-kissed and wine-touched, spa brochure tucked into her overnight bag, phone still buzzing from her group chat. She turned the key, pushed the door open, and stopped. The rug was gone. The couch, the dining table, the lamp she never noticed but always used. She blinked, once, twice, then drifted toward the kitchen, slower now. The counters were bare, the shelves empty, the coffee maker gone. Even the salt shaker had disappeared. She stared for a moment, confused. Then she saw the envelope. Seconds later, her voice cut through the quiet. "She took everything." She said it again, louder, more shrill. Then she called Vera. "She took everything, Mom. It's like she erased herself." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Calm down, Malis. It's just stuff. We can replace it when I get back." Her voice was tight, not soothing, strategic. Malis's voice cracked. "No, you don't get it. There's nothing left. She even shut off the Wi-Fi." Another pause. Then Vera asked coldly, "What about the lease?" Malis scrambled, eyes scanning counters. She opened the envelope, pulled the documents out with shaking hands. "She gave notice," she said. "She paid the rent. Everything's in here." Vera didn't answer immediately. Did you know she was planning this? Malis didn't respond, because she hadn't. She'd been too busy pretending nothing would ever change. Back in Wallingford, I sat on the floor of my new apartment, tea cooling in my hands, the hum of the fridge the only sound. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. You okay? I typed back. Not just okay. Clear. I set the phone down, leaned back against the wall, and closed my eyes. No music played, no fireworks, no dramatic final act, just the quiet breath of a woman who had finally stopped holding hers in. And that was enough. 3 days after I moved out, I woke up to the quietest morning I'd had in years. No dishes clinking, no fake laughter echoing from the living room, no intrusive questions about my work or when I'd loosen up. Just me. The new apartment wasn't much. An old building in Wallingford with creaky floors and baseboard heaters that clicked when they warmed, but it was mine to fill or leave empty, mine to lock, mine to breathe in. I padded into the tiny kitchen, flipped on the electric kettle, and opened the window over the sink. The air was cool, with a bite of early fall. I leaned out for a second, taking in the scent of rain on cement, then came back inside to find Sophie had left a small potted basil plant on my counter. A note was taped to the pot. Fresh starts need roots. I smiled. At the same time, across the city, Vera and Gideon returned to what they still referred to as Mila's place, even though they never really believed it was hers. Malis was already there, pacing around the stripped apartment like it had personally betrayed her. There's nothing here, she said, gesturing wildly. Like, nothing. She even took the shower curtain. Vera frowned as she looked around. This is absurd. Who takes the kitchen towels? She left a note, Malis snapped, picking up the paper still taped to the wall. Her voice dropped as she read aloud. Everything you didn't buy is gone. Everything you assumed is corrected. Gideon, who had been silent until now, stepped closer and took the note from her hand. He read it once, then again. Then, without a word, he turned and walked through the apartment, room by room, taking in the bare walls, the missing furniture, the echoes. This was supposed to be temporary, Vera said quietly, mostly to herself. She was just helping. Gideon didn't respond. Instead, he picked up the envelope Mila had left behind on the kitchen counter. Inside, the signed 30-day notice, the rent receipt, and a copy of her lease. Every I dotted, every T crossed. I didn't think she'd really leave, Vera whispered. Meanwhile, I was rearranging books on a shelf no one had touched but me. I had a new couch arriving in 2 weeks. Until then, I was making do with a floor pillow and the quiet hum of my own voice in my head. I took a deep breath. Then, without hesitation, I picked up my phone and blocked my mother's number. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't even cruel. It was necessary. Because less than 12 hours after she found the empty apartment, she called. First, a text. Malis needs help. She's in shock. You went too far. Then, we need to talk, as a family. No mention of me, of what I needed. Of what I'd been through, just more directives, more guilt-wrapped commands. I deleted the messages. 2 days later, Malis had an interview lined up at a boutique downtown, one of those overly curated shops that sold $300 sweaters and candles that smelled like cedar and regret. She showed up, resume in hand, wearing the blazer she borrowed from me back in April. But HR had already done their homework. An anonymous post, someone claiming to be a former roommate, had surfaced online just days before. It wasn't cruel, just factual, clear, concise, and damning. It detailed entitled behavior, freeloading, emotional manipulation. They rescinded the offer the next day. Malis called Vera crying. Again, Vera texted me. She didn't deserve this, you know that. I blocked her second number too. A week passed, then 2. And one morning, I found a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name and handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside was a single-page letter. Mila, I see it now. How unfair we've been. You did more than we ever acknowledged, and you never asked for much. You deserved better. I'm not writing to ask for anything. Just to say I know now. Dad, I read it 3 times. Not because it was eloquent, but because it was the first time someone in that house had seen me as something other than a utility. I didn't respond, but I didn't tear it up either. I folded it gently and placed it in a drawer beside my bed, next to the basil plant and the key to my apartment. That night, as the wind picked up and the leaves began to scatter across the sidewalk outside, I sat by my window with a cup of tea and stared out at nothing in particular. Somewhere across the city, Vera stood in the hallway outside her bedroom, staring at a family photo from last Thanksgiving. She'd removed the frame a week earlier to dust it and never put it back. It leaned against the wall now, just below the shelf where it used to hang. Everyone was smiling in the picture, Malis on one side, me on the other. But my spot was still empty, because she never rehung it. Because even now, she still didn't know what to do with the space I left behind. There are silences that echo louder than screams, the kind that seep into your skin and settle deep long after the door has closed, the kind that don't haunt you with noise, but with everything that wasn't said. It's been almost a year since I left the apartment on 14th Avenue, since I turned the key one last time and stepped away from a version of myself I no longer had the bandwidth to carry, since I stopped letting obligation masquerade as love and performance as safety. Seattle was just starting to flirt with spring again, not in the obvious ways. There were no vibrant blooms or sudden warm breezes yet, but the light lingered a little longer in the evenings. The air smelled less like wet cement and more like something waking up slowly. Even the rain was softer, no longer pounding but misting, like it understood we were all a little tired of bracing ourselves. Here in this smaller corner of the city, I had built something that didn't look like much from the outside, but it held. My days had taken on a rhythm. Not quite routine, too many variables for that, but a steady pattern nonetheless. Freelance work came in slowly, consistently enough to pay the rent, to keep the fridge stocked, to let me say no to things I didn't want anymore. I had a favorite mug now, a chipped one I'd picked up at a thrift store with a faded drawing of a bear on it, a reading chair by the window that creaked when I shifted, a basil plant that hadn't died yet, which felt like a miracle in itself. It wasn't everything, but it was mine. That afternoon, I decided to visit the new cafe down the block. I'd passed it a dozen times, green and white awning, a chalkboard sign that always had quotes about poetry and resilience in loopy cursive, wooden stools by the window that made it look like the inside of a cabin. My laptop was overheating, my eyes glassy from editing legal copy for a firm that specialized in NDAs and quiet settlements. I needed to step away before I started editing in my sleep. The cafe smelled like cinnamon, ground espresso, and something warm I couldn't name. Acoustic guitar trickled through hidden speakers, just enough to be there, not enough to distract. I stepped in, pulled my coat a little tighter, let my eyes adjust. And then I saw her, Malis, hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup, apron tied neatly around her waist. She was wiping down the espresso machine with the slow, precise movements of someone pretending not to notice anything beyond her task. For a moment, she didn't look up, and then she did. Our eyes met. Her body didn't jerk, but it stilled. The rag in her hand paused mid-swipe. Her shoulders tightened slightly, but she didn't look away. Neither did I. I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. "1 chamomile tea, please," I said, voice calm. "Even." She nodded. "Sure." Her voice barely cleared the counter. No small talk. No, "How have you been?" No apology hovering beneath polite conversation. When the tea was ready, she set it on the counter gently. No eye contact, no change in expression. I placed a $5 bill in the tip jar, gave her a small nod, and walked out. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't closure. It was just enough. Outside, the drizzle had picked up again, light, misty, the kind of rain that didn't bother with drama. I walked slowly, letting the heat from the cup seep into my palms. At the corner, I stopped beneath an awning and watched the cars go by. And I let myself think, for the first time in a long time, about the things I'd stopped naming. The mirror, the first thing Malis ever broke that she never truly apologized for. Not the glass, mirrors are replaceable. It was the refusal to own it. The way she laughed and said, "It wasn't that deep," while I stared at the shards on the floor. The couch I spent 6 months saving for, the one I curled up on when the world felt too loud. The one she used to drape herself across like it was hers to claim. The way she introduced me as her roommate. Always with a grin. Always with that flicker of superiority in her eyes. Like I should be grateful just to be standing beside her. And then, who I became after. The version of myself who didn't scream or argue. The version who packed the moving truck quietly, sent the lease notice without drama, changed the locks without warning. The version who stopped begging to be heard and started deciding where and how to speak. That evening, back in my apartment, I sat by the window with my journal open and my tea now cold. I didn't write pages of reflection, just one line. You can't always fix what others broke, but you can stop handing them the tools. I signed it with a small smiley face. The kind Aunt Ruth used to leave at the bottom of grocery lists. Something small and bright. Just enough. Across town, in the house where the smiles came curated, Vera paused in the hallway. The light from the hallway caught the edge of the picture frame leaning against the wall. She'd taken it down weeks ago, she told herself, to dust. But she'd never rehung it. In the photo, we're all smiling. I'm on one end, Malis on the other. Gideon behind us, one hand on Vera's shoulder. But where I once stood, the light from the nearby window hits just right. My part of the image has faded more than the rest. Vera had noticed before. She noticed it again now. She didn't say anything, didn't call. Didn't send a message. She just stared for a moment, and then walked away. Some stories don't end with apologies. They end when you stop needing one. And that, finally, was mine. Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing peace over pain, clarity over chaos. This story reminds us that family isn't defined by who shares your last name, but by who respects your boundaries. Have you ever had to choose yourself over keeping the peace with family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that cut deep and heal slow.